Got it? I'll rewrite your scenario in English with the same length and number of words as your original, but with a fresh tone and small changes. I'll keep each sentence separate for clarity. There was a time when the average house cost about $15,000. Hard to believe, right? Even then, it felt like a mountain, but one paycheck could support a whole family, mow the lawn on Saturdays, and know the neighbors by name. The dream of a white picket fence actually came with a front porch and a working doorbell. A gallon of gas went for around 30 cents. And that wasn't a discount. That was the everyday price. You'd roll into the station and a guy in a cap would fill your tank, check your oil, wipe the windshield, and maybe hand you a free map. No credit cards, no touch screens. Just a few coins, a nod, and a friendly smile. Cars were everywhere, parked at diners, waiting at red lights, or humming through the suburbs. The Ford Mustang debuted in '64, and suddenly every teenager wanted one on their wall. It wasn't just a car, it was freedom on 4 wheels. And if you knew someone who owned one, you never forgot it. The average U.S. salary in the '60s was about $7,000 a year. Not much, but it went far. One income could keep the house running, the tank full, and maybe cover a summer getaway. You didn't feel rich, but you didn't feel left behind either. Summer camp meant bug spray, bunk beds, and that counselor with a guitar who knew 2 chords. Postcards home read, "Having a great time, even if I cried the first night." Somehow the mosquito bites, the mystery meat, and the campfire songs stayed with you forever. The milkman dropped off glass bottles before breakfast, long before you worried about expiration dates. You'd hear the clink of bottles on the porch before anyone sat at the table. If you were lucky, he left chocolate milk, the kind of surprise that made the morning feel like Christmas. Watching the moon landing live meant crowding around a tiny black and white TV with rabbit ears and snowy reception. No one blinked. Neil Armstrong's voice cut through the static. And for a brief moment, it felt like the whole country sat in the same living room, holding its breath. The Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't just the news. It was a knot in your stomach. People kept radios close and glanced at the sky a little longer. Schools ran duck and cover drills. For a few long days in October 1962, the world seemed to hold its breath. Cameras had flashbulbs you swapped after every shot. They'd pop, sizzle, and get hot. You carried a spare pack like it was ammunition. Family gatherings meant blinding everyone 5 times in a row just to be sure one photo turned out. When the Beatles appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, it was like someone flipped a switch. The hair, the screaming, the girls clutching their chests like they'd glimpsed the future. Maybe they had. For one night, every living room in America became a concert hall with a tiny black and white stage. Seatbelts? We didn't know her. The back of the station wagon was a moving playground. Blankets, toys, even a loose dog or 2. Nobody buckled up. And somehow, we lived. We bounced with every pothole, eating snacks and fighting for the window seat. Hanging laundry outside was just what you did. Lines stretched across backyards, each house with its own basket of clothespins. Sheets danced in the breeze. Towels dried stiff, but smelled like sunshine. You didn't need a dryer to feel clean. Lucy wasn't just a rerun. She was family. You knew the chocolate factory, the grape stomp, the schemes. But you laughed anyway, because it wasn't about the story. It was about comfort. Every kid had a ViewMaster reel. Clicking through 3D images of parks, cartoons, or Disney scenes took you to places you'd only heard of. Sometimes you'd flip through it twice just for fun. When Walter Cronkite came on TV, the room went silent. You didn't argue with him. You listened. He wore the same suit every night, looked straight into the camera, and told you what happened. No shouting, no theatrics, just the facts. And somehow, that was enough. Every neighborhood had a barber shop with a spinning red and white pole outside. Inside, Checkerboard floors, leather chairs, and a radio that never changed the stations. Men talked politics, baseball, and local gossip while getting a trim. No appointments. Just wait your turn and catch up on the town. 8mm home movies captured birthdays, vacations, and backyard afternoons. You'd pull out the screen, thread the reel just right, and dim the lights. The film would flicker and go silent. And suddenly, everyone was laughing at themselves in grainy, jittery slow motion. Pinball machines stood in arcades, diners, and bowling alleys. You didn't need graphics, just flashing lights, bells, and a steady hand on the flippers. Dropping in 2 nickels unlocked a world with a high score mattered more than homework. Aluminum ice trays were medieval. You had to pull up that freezing metal lever with both hands, hoping the ice wouldn't launch across the kitchen. When they finally cracked free, the sound could startle the dog. Somehow, those cubes felt colder than anything from today's fridges. Saddle shoes stayed on your feet until they nearly fell apart. You'd scuff them before school and spend recess smearing on fresh white polish. They were always just uncomfortable enough to notice, but never bad enough to leave behind. Everyone had a pair, like it or not. Typing class was pure clatter and chaos. Heavy keys, loud clicks, and fingers stained with ink from the ribbon. One typo meant starting over from scratch, and forgetting to hit return at the end of the line sent the whole thing sideways. If these little snapshots of the past made you smile, hit subscribe and let's keep walking down memory lane together. Polaroids felt like little miracles. You'd press the button, hear the whir, and wait impatiently. Someone always said, "Shake it," like that made a difference. When the image finally appeared, it felt like proof you'd been there. It went on the fridge, or it vanished forever in some drawer. You could drop a couple of coins into a vending machine and get something worth eating. A frosty soda, a stick of gum, maybe even a sandwich if you dared. No touch screens, no card swipes, just stubborn buttons and snacks that sometimes got stuck one row away. Back then, it felt like America was headed somewhere. There was motion, space, highways, ideas, hope. It wasn't perfect, but people believed in better things and real possibility. When you looked around, you actually felt part of it. The ice cream truck wasn't just noise. It was the sound of summer. You'd hear that tiny tune from blocks away, shout for change, and sprint barefoot over scorching pavement. The menu never changed, but the thrill never faded. Bomb pops tasted better after a full-speed chase. In school, duck and cover drills were treated like spelling lessons. You'd curl under your desk, hands over your neck, pretending that would stop nuclear fire. Nobody asked questions. It was just another Tuesday. The strangest part wasn't the drill, but how normal it seemed. Metal lunchboxes were small fortresses. Your favorite hero or show was stamped on the front, and a thermos inside always smelled faintly of milk. No matter what you packed, the latch eventually bent, the handle eventually cracked. But you carried it daily like a badge of honor. Before cartoons became content, we had Howdy Doody, Captain Kangaroo, and Hopalong Cassidy. The puppets were odd, the sets were plain, and the jokes were ancient, but we didn't care. It felt like they were speaking straight to you, and that was enough. You walked to school without an app, a map, or a parent watching. Just a backpack, a jacket, and the order to come right home. Most of us didn't. We took the scenic route, stopped at the corner store, and still made it home by dinner. The record player was sacred. That click, the hiss, then the music. Every party, every Saturday, every heartbreak lived on vinyl. You knew which 45s skipped and how to fix them with a coin. Nobody played music just for background. You listened. Plastic rain bonnets folded into tiny squares and hid in every mom's purse. The clouds would roll in and, snap out, came the bonnet like a cape. It wasn't flattering, but it did the job. And nobody wondered why all women seemed to own one. You didn't just flip channels. You wrestled the TV. One person gripped the rabbit ears, while the other shouted, "There, no back. Okay, don't move." Tin foil on the tips might buy you a few more seconds of signal. When it worked, it felt like victory. Street lights were our curfew. When they flicked on, you knew it was time to head home, no matter how intense the game. Bikes skidded to a stop. Kids disappeared like smoke. Moms leaned out the door and called once. We didn't argue, we knew. Television didn't run all night. When the last program ended, the flag waved, the anthem played, and then came static. That meant bedtime, or maybe reading, or staring at the test pattern like it meant something. It didn't, but it still felt important. You could actually buy candy with just pennies. You'd walk into the corner shop with a handful of change and leave with a paper bag full of wax bottles, candy buttons, and a jawbreaker big enough for 3 recesses. Sugar was freedom, and nobody checked the label. Encyclopedias arrived by mail. You didn't Google. You waited weeks for. Volume G salesmen knocked on doors, promising smarter kids and shelves lined with gold-lettered wisdom. When they finally came, they sat in the living room like trophies. Even if you only opened tea to look up dinosaurs. Soda never fizzed quite right unless it came in glass. Those bottles had to be pried open with the wall-mounted opener in the garage. Caps piled up on the workbench like souvenirs. There were no twist-offs. You had to put in effort for the nice things. In those days, banks weren't satisfied with just your money. They tempted you with kitchen gadgets. You'd open a savings account and leave with a toaster, some glassware, or maybe a blender. It was strange and delightful, because honestly, the toasters beat the interest rates. The whole house would freeze when Bonanza, Gunsmoke, or the Andy Griffith Show came on. Westerns were everywhere. So were canned laugh tracks. Families watched together, not in silence, but in bursts of quick remarks. He's about to get caught. That guy's trouble. Turn it up. It was the living room breathing. The scent of fresh mimeograph paper rolled in like a tide. Warm, inky, with purple letters, straight from the office. Teachers would hand them out, and half the class would lift them to their faces like they were holding magic. Honestly, no one knew why it smelled so good. A homemade lunch meant a paper sack and a sandwich slightly squashed by books. Bologna with mustard, chips in wax paper, an apple, and maybe a cookie if someone remembered. Under the desk, we traded snacks like we were on Wall Street. When the lights dimmed and the projector whirred on, you knew the slideshow was coming. That first clunk of the tray was unmistakable. Family trips, fuzzy birthday shots, aunts you didn't recognize. Someone always narrated too loudly. And no viewing ever ended without someone falling asleep. Elevators weren't automatic. They had attendants inside. They wore uniforms, and some even had gloves. They'd open the gate, turn a crank, and announce floors like an orchestra conductor. 4th floor, home goods, fabrics, toys. It felt classy, like you were headed somewhere important. Every car trunk carried a scratchy wool blanket that never really got used. It was always there, just in case of a roadside picnic or getting snowed in. You never chose it yourself. It was the last resort blanket at Grandma's, but it was loyal. Church clothes were itchy, the shoes stiff. Collars refused to lie flat. Sunday mornings meant squirming on hard pews, counting ceiling tiles and stifling laughter during prayers. Sometimes the sermon dragged on forever. Sometimes Grandma slipped you a peppermint. Either way, you'd earned brunch. Popcorn didn't come from a bag. You poured kernels into a metal pot, added oil, and shook it like your life depended on it. The smell filled the house before the first pop, and when the bowl overflowed, you knew you'd nailed it. TV dinners weren't fancy, but they felt special. You peeled back the foil and waited forever. The smell of overcooked peas, Salisbury steak, Mashed potatoes and a half-baked brownie filled the kitchen. It was a little aluminum tray of modern life. Tinsel wasn't plastic yet. It was thin, shiny metal strands you never tossed out. You placed them one by one on the tree. Christmas lights glowed behind them, making the whole tree look like a postcard. It stuck to everything, and nobody cared. Radio buttons clicked like tiny safes. You'd push one in, and the rest popped out like jealous siblings. You could set your favorite station and find it with a single press. The sound crackled, the music played, and nobody called it analog. It just worked. Behind the TV, small orange tubes glowed faintly. They hummed softly, like the set was breathing. If the picture flickered, you gave it a smack. If it died, someone carried a bulb in a paper bag to the hardware store. Fixing things wasn't optional. It was expected. The whole country paused when Kennedy's funeral aired. Even kids knew it was something heavy. Black and white images, the slow drumbeat, the riderless horse. It was one of the first times America mourned together, silently, in millions of living rooms. Hair curlers weren't just for salons. You'd twist them tight before bed, hoping you didn't crush your head in your sleep. Some were foam, some plastic, some held with pins. In the morning, you'd unravel them like a gift, hoping the curls lasted until lunch. School milk came in stubborn little cartons. Color TV didn't ease its way in. It showed up with a splash. When a neighbor bought one, the whole street stopped by. You'd stand there with arms folded, nodding like you knew all about tint and contrast. Even the cartoons felt intense. It was like watching tomorrow on a fuzzy little box. Bank drive-thrus weren't just handy, they were downright exciting. You'd pull up, press the speaker button, and send your deposit shooting through a clear tube with a perfect whoosh. The little canister came back with a receipt, a lollipop, and that magical feeling that machines were finally on your team. Sunday comics were an occasion. You de-spread the paper flat on the living room floor and sprawl across 2 full pages of color. Peanuts, Dick Tracy, Little Orphan Annie. Dad read the headlines, but for kids, the comics were the big story. Back then, tipping your hat was a small move with a lot of meaning. Men did it to greet a neighbor or step aside for a woman on the sidewalk. Women wore white gloves downtown like it was nothing special. Dressing well was part of going out, even to Woolworths. The sidewalk doubled as a playground. Kids crouched in circles for marbles, tossed jacks across the pavement, or tried to master pickup sticks without toppling the pile. No batteries, no screens, just kids loudly arguing over rules they'd invented minutes earlier. Some swore that if you spun a record backward, you'd hear secret messages. So we'd sit there, turning vinyl the wrong way, listening for whispers between guitar riffs. Maybe it was static, but at the time, it felt like striking gold. Empty lots turned into summer ball fields. No coaches, no refs, just local kids and a few hats for bases. Somebody always brought a taped-up ball and a bat with a crack in it. You played until a mom's voice called that dinner was ready. In certain department stores, you could slip your feet into a real X-ray machine to check shoe size. You'd watch your toe bones wiggle on the screen. It felt futuristic and oddly thrilling, even though no one knew how safe it was. School buses didn't have seatbelts, and no one cared. You bounced on green vinyl seats, windows cracked halfway, backpacks sliding on the floor. Field trips weren't to safety checklists. They were paper lunches and hoping you didn't get stuck next to the odd kid. School assemblies were a whole thing. The entire school filed into the auditorium, waving tiny flags and singing patriotic tunes. Sometimes there was a guest speaker, sometimes a slideshow. Mostly, it was an excuse to squirm and whisper until the principal gave that look. Gas stations used to hand out little prizes: toy dinosaurs, state maps, glass tumblers. Kids collected the freebies. Adults enjoyed a full tank plus a smile. It wasn't just gas. It was a moment of fun. Fountain pens were messy work. You'd come home with blue ink on your fingers and smudges on your shirt. Still, they felt sophisticated, like signing in cursive actually meant something. Even if it bled through the page, cursive was more than handwriting. It was a rite of passage. You practiced on giant-lined paper with a pencil until the loops looked right. Teachers circled the messy ones in red, but once you nailed it, you felt classy, like your words had a signature. Roll-on deodorant wasn't sleek or invisible. It was a glass bottle with a cold metal ball that rattled with every use. The smell was sharp and clinical, but it worked, unless you overdid it and stained your shirt. Recess meant swapping treasures. Comic books, baseball cards, marbles worth bragging about. You'd make your pitch, swear you had more at home, and seal the deal with a handshake. No phones, no apps, just a playground economy powered by trust. Fizzies were little tablets you'd drop in water to make instant soda. Cherry, grape, root beer. They fizzed like magic and tasted like pure childhood. You could pretend you were a scientist or just enjoy your drink bubbling like a lava lamp. Tube socks went high, with red or blue stripes at the top, folded or bunched down. You wore them with shorts and sneakers, without a hint of embarrassment. Every kid looked ready for gym class, even when they weren't. Old chemistry sets came with things that would never pass safety rules now. Real chemicals, glass beakers, tiny burners. You could whip up a stink bomb or foaming volcano and not get in trouble. Just don't spill on the shag carpet. Transistor radios were pocket-sized wonders. You'd hold one to your ear, squint at the tiny dial, and scroll through crackling AM stations. Beatles, Motown, baseball games. It was like holding the world's soundtrack in your hand. Even if the batteries died too soon, cereal boxes came with mail-in toy offers. You'd cut the corner, tape some coins to a card, and wait weeks for your prize. Half the time it was junk, but getting something in the mail was the real win. Tupperware parties weren't really about containers. It was pastel bowls with a burp seal and a reason for moms to dress up and gossip. The kitchen filled with laughter, and leftovers lived in the same bowls for years, somehow missing their lids. Tang was bright orange, a little tart, and legendary. Not because it was tasty, but because astronauts drank it. At NASA had sealed its fate. Suddenly every kid wanted a glass, even if Mom mixed it too strong. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In hit like a blast of confetti. Flashing lights, rapid-fire jokes, costumes, and punchlines that made adults laugh while kids just blinked. You didn't get all of it, but you watched. It felt like grown-up TV with just enough weird to keep you hooked. Rotary phones were in no rush. If your friend's number had too many nines, you were stuck for a while. Slip your finger mid-dial, and you started from scratch. But that clicky return spin felt better than any modern beep. Bench seats were just benches. No belts, no cup holders, just wide vinyl where you'd slide into your siblings every sharp turn. The only seatbelt was Mom's arm swinging out in front of you at every stop. Plastic couch covers were a summer punishment disguised as protection for the furniture. They trapped every bit of heat. You'd sit in shorts and instantly regret it. Legs stuck, back sweaty, but you weren't allowed to take them off. Not until guests left, and sometimes not even then. The yellow pages weighed a ton. Thick as a brick and shoved under the phone, or used to boost a kid at dinner. Need a plumber? Flip a page. Lost a pet? Check the classifieds. It was a phone book, a booster seat, and a doorstop all in one. Film came in little black canisters you loaded by hand. Pop the camera open, pull the leader, winged it just right. Once it was in, every click felt like a promise. No previews, no do-overs, just faith and a trip to the developer. If you're smiling at these memories, make sure to subscribe so you never miss more trips back in time. Slide projectors were never quiet. Every slideshow came with a click and a clunk as the round carousel spun. Photos of Grandma at the lake, blurry vacations, lopsided birthday shots. Half the slides were upside down. You sat in the dark with a paper plate of cake, pretending not to be bored. Canned spaghetti was a midweek lifesaver. No questions asked. Heated in a saucepan, served in a chipped bowl. It was orange, soft, and Italian, or so the label claimed. You didn't know better. It was dinner. It was cheap. And somehow, it still tasted good. Drive-in theaters were asphalt magic. You'd park, hook the metal speaker on your window, and hope it worked. Families in wagons, couples in convertibles, all facing the glowing screen under the stars. If you spilled popcorn, no one cared. The car was already a disaster. Diaper boxes had instructions printed on the side. Boil and bleach. No disposables, just stacks of white cloth folded into perfect squares, fastened with safety pins. The pail in the bathroom wasn't decorative, and laundry day smelled like soap, rubber pants, and stubborn love. Metal toy trucks were almost weapons, heavy, sharp-edged, and usually missing a wheel. They survived sandboxes, stair tumbles, and backyard burials. Get one for Christmas, and it was built to last. If your little brother threw it, it left dents in both wall and floor. Everyone remembered where they were when JFK was shot. At school, at work, at home, it didn't matter. Radios went silent. TVs flickered on. Adults cried. Even kids knew something had broken in the world. After that day, it never felt the same. Green stamps were everywhere. You peeled them at the store, stuck them into little books, and saved for blenders, fans, or maybe a toaster. The catalog was pure fantasy. When you finally had enough to trade in, it felt like hitting the jackpot. Help-wanted ads came in 2 categories, male and female. No one questioned it. That was just the way it was. Secretary here, mechanic there. The world was split in half, and crossing the line wasn't easy. Soda bottles were pocket money in disguise. You'd haul them back to the store in a clinking box and get nickels in return, then spend it on candy. You could spot a returnable from a block away. It had a certain shimmer of possibility. Movie theaters started with a cartoon. Bugs Bunny, Popeye, Tom and Jerry, a little burst of joy before the lights dimmed. You laughed, sipped your drink, and then the real movie began. It was a full night out. Popcorn, candy, and 2 hours of magic. Dad's aftershave was brute. That green bottle lived on the bathroom shelf like it owned the place. One splash in the hallway smelled of cedar, menthol, and manhood. Every dad had a scent. Every kid winced when they tried it. But somehow, that sharp spice still smells like adulthood to anyone who lived the 60s. Sunday night was shoe-shining night. You'd spread newspaper, pull off dusty loafers, and pop open the polish tin. The smell filled the room. A few swipes with a brush, a rub with a cloth. You did it because Mom said so, and because clean shoes meant you were ready for Monday. You could still smoke on planes. Flight attendants handed out free cigarettes, and ashtrays were built into every armrest. No windows opened, but everyone exhaled like it was fine. You landed smelling like a fireplace, and nobody complained. The Sears catalog was a block of dreams. Toys, clothes, furniture, all thicker than your school books. You bent page corners, circled items, and pretended Santa saw it too. When the Christmas edition arrived, it was better than any parade on TV. Ordering from a catalog was patience training. Circle your pick, mail the form, and wait. Weeks, sometimes months. Then one day, a brown box appeared with your name. That wait made it feel like treasure. New plastic lunchboxes had their own scent, sweet, sharp, a bit chemical. You de-lift the lid to find a bologna sandwich in wax paper, and maybe a Twinkie if you were lucky. That first whiff of vinyl meant school was truly back. The kitchen table wasn't granite or glass. It was Formica. Usually yellow or mint with chrome legs that wobbled just enough to spill your milk. You ate there, did homework there, even fixed a toaster there. It was scratched, stained, and perfect. If that sparked some good memories, maybe it's time to skip ahead into the bold, bright, and unforgettable 80s. Click the video on your screen and step into a decade of big hair, big music, and even bigger fun. It's waiting.